Good evening, everybody. Welcome to this rather unexpected episode of Meeting of the Minds. I still go by the name of Dorian's Grave. Before I jump into tonight's introduction of the guests, let me first apologize to people who are watching this and thinking that my guest, Naeem, aka Nimi, is going to be doing some poetry. Well, he's not going to be doing any poetry. What happened was we were supposed to have a slam night tonight. Yes, absolutely. But we had to listen to the voice of reasoning, and that was just because it's what you call høstferie here in Norway. And we realized that it's probably the first time some of our guests or our viewership in attendance have the chance to go back home and visit their families, especially when the world is finally opening up. And we decided, there's no point doing a slam night tonight. We'd rather have someone else just come in and tell us a beautiful story about who they are in terms of their artistic movements, and maybe we can learn a few things listening to them. So no, ladies and gentlemen, there is no slam poetry night tonight, but slam poetry will return. It will return for sure. But in the meantime, let's say hello and welcome to Nimi. Should we go with Nimi?
Nimi will go, yeah.
How are you?
I'm good. Yeah. Really enjoying høstferie,
Okay.
as they call it.
What have you done? What have you been doing?
Being away with kids, hanging out up on the hill, as you do.
Because you haven't done that.
Yeah, it's what you do here. You go hide in the woods on a hill somewhere and hang out with your family and be nice to each other for a week before you have to come back to reality and sort of get on with work again and do the normal stuff. So,
Is there still love at home right now, or are you on the brink of reality?
well, I'm escaping tonight. It's a night off, so But it's a nice thing. I think what you said now, really about people kind of returning home, it's a massive one. We're all feeling that. So I totally respect people stepping up and trying to reconnect because we've been shut off. It's a strange time. So
what was your 2020 experience like?
Yeah, 2020. I'm lucky. I'm a creator, so anywhere is my studio. You have an issue there with kind of like I come from a good ADHD background with a hint of some PTSD thrown in. So we are not really capable of sitting still. I've already warned the microphone people I will be moving a lot during this because I don't have the ability of it. I have a goldfish memory and I need to move around and express myself physically. But no, 2020 was exactly that, how to settle the mind and come down, look at things again, recreate ourselves, like you said yourself. You've stayed off the grid. Then we suddenly have to find a new format, rediscover a way to tell our story and come forward again. So here we are, full rotation. I don't know, a year and a half later, I guess, we're all a little bit itchy. We're waiting for something to
give.
Something to give. Yeah, that's it. But I think there's been a great process for creatives. Maybe everybody got to see what it's like to be us for the first time, because we're locked in most of the time doing stuff in this periphery. It's central, it's focused downwards, and then you come out and express it. Especially in my game, it's how it is. But
your game is crazy. I mean, we walk around the streets here in Bergen, we see a splash of Nimi everywhere. It's how does it make you feel when you walk around the city and you see your artwork or your piece of you?
I'm hoping they paint over some.
Okay.
Yeah. That's the danger of it. It's nice to put up work, but to create a good environment, especially in street art and graffiti, there should be renewal. Renewal is what makes it interesting.
Huh.
when it becomes repetitive and becomes this kind of, how can you place it, this icon of a position, then you sort of lost the point of it. It should be renewed and brought back, and there should be some new minds coming in. We avoided a street art festival in Bergen purposely because of that. The guys that I know who are capable of doing large scale have all sort of come down and sat together and gone, let's push it out of Bergen. So we started a festival in Hardanger, in the valley, and we've worked our way from Rosendal, there's some areas around Husnes. We'll move towards Halsene, where there's actually another incredible series of works that have been curated by John XC. If you go to the toilet downstairs, you'll see his tag on the toilet, like, oh, I'm not.
I'll be sure to check it out next time.
Yeah. The point being is that if you fill the town with large-scale murals, it'll be years before anybody can afford to kind of hire in artists to do a change. What works in Bergen and why Bergen will stay the center of street art in Norway is simply because we create a journey. You wander through the streets. You discover things all the time. That gives us a little advantage over, say, Stavanger. Stavanger's incredible. They have like the top 20 best artists in the world arrive every year. The New Art Festival that Martin Reed has been running is exceptional. I mean, you won't find it in another place. But it doesn't have a ground-up movement, this grassroots kind of identity. I don't know why that is. Maybe it's you feel intimidated when you see really amazing work. But
no, I think it's probably just respect.
Possibly. But I would imagine a knock-on effect. Here, it seems to just be thriving.
Yeah, it rains a lot.
There's a long discussion just about that part. It has a strong culture, I'll put it that way. Yeah.
Oh, you know better than I do. But speaking of identity, you're actually coming out of South Africa.
I am. Mm-hmm.
So tell us, you're half South African, Johannesburg to be exact, and you're half Indian.
Yep.
What was that like at home? That must have been crazy.
Yeah. You're kind of like placed in between two cultures immediately because you don't belong to either side. You're not completely black, you're not completely white. But you're definitely non-white. And that's what the narrative of South Africa was at the time. It's apartheid, and you're not welcome. That's the rule. You're just the shops, the buses. It's go back to segregation in the US, and it was not long ago in South Africa. So much of that sits very strongly in me. I think that's why the activism part has always sat really quite close to my heart. That should never happen again. There's something about distorting people's humanity and not letting them view themselves themselves as is quite destructive.
I mean, being an artist, everyone is born, not everyone. The artist is usually born with some kind of fire in their soul from a very young age. And when you've been exposed to that kind of oppression in South Africa at the time, what did it do to you mentally at that point?
I'll give you a funny story. When I was 6, we rioted in our kindergarten.
When you were 6?
We rioted.
Okay.
This is a bunch of kindergarten kids throwing chairs through windows, losing their minds, being completely freaked out because you had to go through such a horror show of learning. There was... You get kind of like dragged out and caned in front of people, for very simple things. Like if somebody saw you use an eraser, or if you were a little bit late. So these traumas were that you were dragged from your chair over the desk, and your pants taken down, and you get properly shamed in front of your peers. So yeah, that happened, man. And I still visually can see this guy, and I'll never forget this image. This guy, Vernie, stood on top of what I thought was a huge hill, and he had this bamboo cane in his hand, and he broke it.
Holy shit.
And we were literally released at that moment. It's nothing I've really repeated or wanted to tell people, because it's just, it's the core that kind of drives a lot of the machinery in me. Don't ever let this happen to your children. You know, don't let them get to this point where, as a young child, they need to be that angry. They need to respond. So this is, let's say, 1976. They're about to change the regulation of South Africa. Mainly, there's about 11 languages, but the main language was English. Mm-hmm. And Afrikaans, the broken Dutch language, was about to be inferred as the main language. But the riots were going everywhere. There was a lot of demonstrations. I think seeing my mother at the time, which was a big influence for me, because she was kind of stepping outside of what the community expected of her. She kind of went and had a career.
What did the community expect of her?
That she would be home and behave herself. But you can't when you're kind of told to go to work when you're 9 years old, you know. So you get that 9-year-old education, and then you're going to work. You're an adult. She had her first child at 15, married, you know, 3 children before 20. That's a big fucking move.
Oh shit.
I blessed myself that I didn't have to experience what she did. So when you look in retrospect, she got us out of there. Her and my father were divorced. She remarried. She'd met an Englishman. They had lived in South Africa for a while. Then as things began to get worse. So my mother was a kind of what we are, which is this blended culture. We're neither side, you know. Even though there's an Indian side in it, there was also this kind of mix Afrikaner side. Mm. Our grandmother, we couldn't even tell you where to begin with that. She looks almost Japanese somehow. Okay. But you've got to remember, every culture that gets kind of closed off has already an internal culture. So you'll meet African Chinese women. You'll see, you know, look at Brazil. Brazil expresses it really clearly.
Absolutely.
But it's there was such a diversity in how people looked. So my mother could get away with saying she's Italian, so she could be with my father and be in public or to do things, you know. So there was that issue. So they decided to move to England. So in 77, they left in 76, and we came the year after.
Did things change, or was it a new society you find yourself in, which is England or London or the world?
Yeah,
the universe?
we moved to where my stepfather had work in Essex. He ran a company there.
But were things different? My point was, were things different? Because you're coming from segregation.
My first experience was we were in Paris before we went to London, and I was being served by white people. Wow. I wasn't sure what to do. I really wasn't sure what to do. How do I address this person? Do I have to be polite? Do I have to be this kind of like thing? Because I was already quite afraid of the change, you know, as a little kid you should be. But it was sort of refreshing, because when I did something wrong in school, the teacher didn't whip me. You had to do something really wrong. Like, I mean, go out of your way to kind of get a proper beating. And it wasn't any different in England at the time, you know. England was not the best educated didn't have the best school system, let's put it that way. But still, no, I think it's just generally public school systems there. They're just, large populations. It's difficult to kind of control it. No, but I think that the reactions were much milder and teachers were kind, and that was very odd. But I found myself getting very attached to one particular teacher. I thought he was incredible. So he took me under his wing a little bit and gave me a bit more teaching time, and I understood kind of a path forward here would be really good. And then I didn't understand English racism. Everybody in England was a Paki. That meant a Pakistani, because the first immigrants are actually somewhere between Pakistan, India, and Bangladesh, but as a generic word. Exceptionally, like we know the words used, but Paki was the central word. So I sort of looked at them going, what's that? And they were trying to express what racism was. And I said, well, I come from a place where they'll shoot you. What is it that you're offering here? Should I be afraid of this, or?
Well, I was having a conversation with a friend of mine, and we're talking about the differences between systematic oppression and what racism is. And it's funny how you say that, because for me, when I try to define those nuances, coming from a place where racism is pretty much non-existent, if you did something wrong, something happened, and that was it. Yeah. That was it. Yeah. And then when I came here, just to mirror a bit of what you just said in terms of the differences between systematic oppression and racism, is racism is like a monster that's eating you alive, right? And it's eating you alive. Yeah. And there's really nothing you can do about it. You can scream, you can yell, you can shout. There's nothing you can do about it, and it's indescribable. You can't really explain it neither, right? And then you have systematic oppression. That's a monster that's eating you alive, and at the same time, it's feeding you. You know what I mean? Yeah. So you're not sure what's really going on. Like you said, you went to the UK, and the teachers it was the first time the teachers weren't beating anybody. That right there is like, oh, wow, I'm in the best place in the world. And then all of a sudden, you've been called something else, which is Paki, right? Yeah. Now, Paki, sorry. How do you explain
solid,
that?
good, racist, raise the hairs on the back of your neck kind of word, No, I didn't understand it. So it was looking. I was immediately looking for like-minded souls. I was in a very generically white area. The first, which is still my best mate today, was a guy standing on the top of a hill, and I've seen him. I was like, what's that guy doing? And he's run, and it's raining, and he's just slid down his hill on his knees, covered himself in mud. I've just looked and gone, that guy looks like he really doesn't give a shit. This is the guy I've got to hang out with. So I go running up to him, who are you? And he's from an Irish family, so they kind of, they had that humor where they just kind of like shook it off. Yeah, deal with it, shake it off, move forward,
How long were you in the UK for?
Good over 20 years, I'm still there. My mother's there, so I keep up to date with life in the UK, and I try to know how my friends are doing. And even though it's been almost as long as I've been in Norway, I feel more attached to England, simply because that was what gave me this opportunity to be who I am today.
When did you realize that you had an allure or this hidden talent for spaces? Because I know you studied architecture. Yeah.
That came later. That was in my 30s. That was some friends of mine just dragging me down that path. Okay. They'd all studied architecture, and then a few of them became the teachers at the school, and just sort of said to me, "This is a really good path for you." I'd had experience in kind of with furniture making, with design, and lots of directions I kind of like pushed myself into because I was interested, but how to amalgamate, how to bring things together was in something that has a broader overview. So I got to study under a very interesting professor at the time, Svein Hatley, who had a kind of like a beat poet kind of language.
We're in the right
You know, he wasn't a guy who would just tell you things straight. He'd be drawing out something between Fanta and Reichenberg and how they relate to each other, and you're just sitting there going, okay, how do we approach this guy's thoughts? But he was a fascinating guy. So I caught the old school culture of the architect school in Bergen before it changed. You know, this is, how far back was it when Svein died? About 8 years? Yeah. So it's about 8 years back. He passed away.
Oh, wow.
But he'd sort of given up the school 2 years after I'd been studying there. But you know, what a character. Incredibly interesting man. Studied under Oscar Hansen, which was part of the original group that went away from modernism and started to look at how the layout of Warsaw was after it was completely flattened by the Germans. Mm-hmm. And they reintroduced a new form of architecture called open form.
Right.
And this was to look at how do we integrate multiple layers in cultures and give an opportunity for new culture to reintegrate itself. Okay. So the city was built in a way that a next generation could come and add without it being taking away the initial structuring.
Is this what actually led to you saying what you said about you actually enjoy when your arts gets...
That's the point. That's
right.
What I've taken from it. I guess that's the very strongest part of architecture that I've taken, is that kind of understanding the broader overview, but looking at it from an urbanism point of view. How do we approach an area with just not going to decorate a wall, but how do you get a community involved?
Okay.
So that's been my main sort of direction of trying to work with. This isn't just decoration. This is something that you can grow from, and you can initiate, and you can get other people involved, and you can really look at your area in a new way again.
Right. I find that people of a foreign background, artists especially, and creatives, we tend to have a collective approach.
Absolutely.
To the
Absolutely.
arts.
You should not be out there on your own.
But
it's a lesson learned, put it that way.
No, for practical reasons, of course. But at the same time, when you think about what you call integral consciousness, and it's this philosophy where I see it mostly from especially, well, for lack of a better word, minorities. You come from South Africa, right? There's this need to bring people together as one, probably because you couldn't see that when you were younger, right? When you were in South Africa, like you said, apartheid, right? Everything was being split up. There was this color here, that color there, this, that.
Of course.
And then when you get older, you see all these things growing up as a child, and it's creating these influences on you. And then you get older, and now you feel that, I'm doing the same thing too.
Yeah. I think I sort of got my mother to thank for my other passion, which is food. As a kid, we had a key in the door in England. No one had a key in the door. You get robbed. But we had a key in the door because the whole neighborhood was in our house.
Oh.
And they'd be there straight after school. My mother would have this ridiculous pot like this with serious food. South African food it'll take time. You're stuck on Mexican food at the moment, so it's good. It'll come. But this was exceptional food, and it's just every kid in the neighborhood sitting there chowing down, and that's where these large groups of friends I grew up with sort of like came together, and we came together over shouting at a dinner table and laughing and having these kind of discussions, and I'm sort of so glad I still have a really strong connection to that same group. We still keep in touch with each other. We know where we each are, and a fairly balanced bunch, you know. Even with all the shit that happened in England at that time, they are they're doing well. They move forward, you know.
After architecture, did you land a job as an architect?
No.
Or was that?
No, that was the one sad part of it. I was either going to start for myself or kind of look at the big 5 companies in Bergen who were hiring at the time, but there wasn't really any replies to my emails.
Why do you think that is?
Same reason there's never been a reply to my emails. I think that's just part of it, you know.
Part of what?
Well,
part of what?
I think where it started, let's look at what I was doing pre-9/11.
Okay.
So
You said
on the
9
day of
9/11.
9/11, I'll never forget this. On the day of 9/11, I was doing the redesign of Gaia Luedi's studio down at Vafta. This is Aurora's manager. I was redesigning their studio into kind of like a underground submarine. It was a great concept. Functioned with the whole thing. But I walked into there for the first discussion on the project, and on the television, 9/11 was going on. I'll give you a really simple thing. This is the first thing you notice. When I first came to Bergen, and I'd lived in Norway now for, say, 5 years around then, and you were noticed, but you were noticed more by women. They didn't just look at you, they looked at you. And if you've lived in England, girls look at you like that. Why? What are you looking at?
Right.
You know, and you have to say your piece before they even pay attention to you. But Norwegian women literally looked you up and down like, I'm checking you out. And I had no qualms about it. 9/11 happened. I have the look of whatever this narrative is that was put in front of us. I was literally never looked at the same, till one day. And that was the really tragic part, which has recently happened now again, which was 22nd of July with Anders Behring Breivik, which was probably the worst day in the history of this country. I didn't dare go out that day. I was just watching the news, watching every brown person in New York getting hunted down on the street. Sikhs. What does Sikhs got to do with it? It was just a real horror show. I was so afraid. And then after it came out, I remember the journey on the bus into town, where people sort of looked at you with a very clear eye for the first time in years. You know, before that, you could say that very few people would sit next to you on a bus. You're kind of like the worst case scenario. Why would I sit next to you? But then you can say that about Norwegians generally. Nobody wants to sit next to each other, but still there's a seat available, but they'd rather stand. So what had happened was that people apologized to me with a look. We thought it was terrorists. We didn't realize it was one of us doing it. And I nodded in full empathy because of the shock of it. And it was that. And that's the first time in a long time I've had like a public response to a general behavior. And it's very interesting. I can give you like a humorous version of it. Is a guy taking a bus from Sutra on his own. African guy gets on, sees him all alone, goes flying up, sits next to him. You're all alone, buddy. That's our culture.
Vibes, man.
You don't leave somebody alone.
It's vibes.
You know? That's the deal. So this sort of shut off for a while there made me understand that something had changed in the culture. There had been a level of fear brought in that was even more extreme than it was already. It's not been fantastic anyway, but then this really added a layer. And then it was sort of like how do I undo this? How do I not look like me? You know, how do you not represent yourself as yourself?
Was there a time you actually gave into code switching? You've heard about code switching,
Yes,
right?
yes.
Was there ever a time where you said, okay, I need to start code switching so I could just be accepted into society?
So this happens. I'm living in the middle of the woods in Norway. I go back home. I arrive at the airport. My sister's there to pick me up, and she's just staring at me. What the fuck have they done to you? Literally, like, shocked, because I'm suddenly wearing this uniform of trying to fit into some local environment that wasn't me. You know, I come from you show your shit regular, but I'm suddenly blanded out, and I was so afraid for a long time. The light came when I came to Bergen. Literally, I lived out in Gudbrandsdal with the son of my mother, Vigdis, and it wasn't the easiest place for me to live because it was about that communication. They told me very early on, well, you probably need to be here about 15 years before we kind of take you in. I had good connection to her friends and the near people in her family and that, but the outside of it was that, no, we think you're a tourist, you know, you're not going to get in, so we're not going to use effort on you. And that's fine. That's fine. It's what it is. And I'm super social.
Yeah.
You know, I'll go chat to anybody. But where it really upset me was within my work. I was working for kind of furniture companies at the time. And kind of like, you know, I had a way of doing things. If you can't get the interview, get access to the job, you create something they want. And that's the way it goes. So if you can create something they haven't seen before.
Become an asset.
Exactly. Create the niche. So it was sort of interesting that I worked with this incredibly interesting Filipino guy. And he had an energy. God, I wish I could just, I want some battery chargers and just clip into the guy a little bit because he glowed. He glowed. When he smiled, he lit a room up. And this guy was being really bullied when I arrived at that company. He was kind of like shunned, but I didn't stop him. And that's when I realized it. Okay, you are taking this in. Why the hell are you taking this in? Follow this guy. This guy's got it sussed. He's just going to glow. He's going to glow from the inside and carry it with him.
But it's killing him though.
Absolutely, but at the same time, don't let it show. That was the deal. Don't let it show.
The psychological repercussions of microaggressions. You know, it's something that shows later.
Absolutely.
In
I'm looking at it now, you know, in hindsight and thinking like, why did I choose that area and go about it? And obviously the fact was I wasn't going to last there. There were bets at home in England that they gave me 3 weeks. And I did come home after 3 weeks. I was literally like, oh God, what am I doing out here? You know, there's nobody I understand. And I'm coming out of a very interesting kind of underground house culture in London that is booming, you know. And suddenly I'm long-arm dancing in a club in Norway, trying to figure out who the fuck I am in this culture. But you know, it has its charm. Don't get me wrong. There are always wonderful people you can meet along the way, but there is also that danger that you meet them on a Saturday night, but they are too afraid to talk to you on the Monday.
Oh yeah, that's.
So that just comes as a sense. I understood it later when it's a sense of insecurity, that being open to oneself is it's very difficult.
my first exposure to that behavior was, I believe it was. I'm going to say this on live television, and it's going to be weird.
We just have to talk about
Whatever
it.
you're going to talk about.
Now,
I said hi to a lady. All right, I said hi to a lady, and we had a good conversation. It was great, and of course, this was way back in the day. I never really thought about racism.
When did you come here?
2002.
Okay.
2002, being since then, and I remember we had a good conversation, and this guy from across the room got so mad, right? But one thing I know about Norway is most Norwegians are very good at hiding it. Mm-hmm. You don't really see it. You know, it's like in Africa, right? In Africa, if someone is pissed at you, they would show. You know what I mean? It's like, man, it is going down. You know?
Yeah, and you get it out the way.
And then cool. All right,
Get out the way.
Shit, it's all good. We get it. You know, either we talk about it or we fight about it, or we just move on. You know. Yeah. But here, it's just so disguised, and I didn't know this at the time. I was naive, of course. Even till today, sometimes I still can't figure it out. And this guy just comes over, seemingly nice, shakes my hand, or he shook my hand. Sorry. And I was like, hey, what's up, man? You know, all good. We're having a good conversation, blah, 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 blah. And all of a sudden, he just like, so I'm like, okay, we're all good, right? So I keep talking to this lady, and all of a sudden, he just flips. And he says, go back to your country, you monkey. Right? And I'm like, okay. You know, like, what was that? You know,
what exactly is
what does that even mean? I have no idea what this means. What is this? Now, apparently, this is racism in effects. Okay, and I'm coming from Nigeria. Nobody talks like that, right? So I'm like, okay, what the hell are you talking about? He's like, and he keeps going on, and to me, I'm thinking, what are you saying, mate? What are you doing? And so the lady now tells me that he's just mad because we're having a good conversation and he's jealous and whatever. And I'm like, oh, okay. But why did he say it like that? You know, it took me a while because racism, people don't understand this. They think every black person understands racism. This is what people think, you know. And that's because the narrative mostly we're being fed is a narrative coming from America, unfortunately. Yeah. Because Africans who grew up in Africa, you don't know what racism is.
Not in that sense, no.
Not in that sense. You know what tribalism is. You know what xenophobia is.
Yeah.
You know what ethnicism is, but not racism. So I was like, okay, that's interesting. And I figured it out. I'm like, oh, that's what that is. You know, my point is that you as a foreigner, sometimes you get hated on for things that come naturally to you. So your Filipino friend, for example, who was exuberant, smiley, could take any, whatever, you know. Apparently some people don't like that.
Yeah. Yeah. I guess there's some dislike to it. But so I had a conversation with a guy I work with. He tells you, I'm from Sunnfjord. We're the kind of people who sit in the back of the pub. We don't talk to anybody, and we hide our pint like that.
Okay.
And I said, like, and how do you get on with the rest of the fjord? He says, we don't. We hate everyone equally. And that resonated with me immediately. That's when I realized, like, okay, wait, we now have to look at a culture. I'll give you a good example. I did a anthropology study in 2004 based on two cultures that were similarly land-based. So it was Chile and it was Norway. Chile has a mountainous region, 4,000 meters high. Norway has valleys and mountains. You know, it's about accessibility to language throughout history. So what you found was that Chile, you could find the same dialect running through the country. Everyone communicated in. In Norway, ask the guy from Sunnfjord, the guy living in the valley behind, he didn't have a clue what he was saying. He didn't have a clue. He said, I listened to him, I don't understand a word he's saying. This is literally the same little pocket with a mountain in between. And they changed their language completely. So, okay, the winter shuts off the valleys.
Right.
People have to choose this inverted thing. That's why those scary black and white photos from back in the day kind of look very similar. Let's not go there. But the point being is once you shut down a culture, you should be able to have access to stories at least and be able to continue the pathway. There's always people traveling over the mountain with goods and selling and telling stories and moving forward. But I think it comes with an intrinsic nationalistic pride that sits with your pocket, your people.
It's almost borderline individualistic pride, really.
No, I think it goes deeper than that, man. I think you have been so, how to say it without sounding rude, actually.
It depends on what's rude.
There's an incestuous identity to it.
Okay.
And not in the sexualized sense of it.
No.
It's about cultural incestuosity. It's about being so clear about who you are. Like, I'm the strongest guy in the town. I'm the smartest. I do this. And they have to survive on that community throughout periods. And I think when a culture gets caught down to those limits, and especially the populations aren't big, you're going to be very clear with each other. You're going to live that life. Go into some of these old paintings and poetry, and it's quite powerful stuff, how they viewed themselves as these individuals. They didn't see themselves as a part of a larger unit.
Right, that's my point. It's borderline.
You even look at, go further back. I did some work on the Bunad culture. So I've done some artistic work where I drew the Bunad onto my daughter, and did it kind of disintegrating, showing some kind of cultural identity she will have to deal with later. Where does she find herself in trying to keep the pieces of this Bunad in place? But before, you had this kind of plate here that was hand-sewn by every single farm. It was a complete individual artistic piece, separated from everything else. Later, the Bunad came to Norway. I think it was adopted from, I want to say Sweden, but I can't give you the exact history.
Does anybody know?
But it wasn't very Norwegian of the time. But this piece of embroidery was about kind of like identifying where you're from. That was your piece of work, and it was shown as that. And I've tried to be generous in this, trying to look at this individual thing and understand it. And I've traveled all over Norway. I've worked in and out of everything. And I meet incredible people, and then I meet tragic kind of situations where I am definitely not welcome, even though I'm invited to do something, really sociable with their culture.
Unfortunately,
well,
you feel it.
You'll see it in my work. I leave behind a piece of work resonating the emotions I feel. So go through my work, look at all the places I've been, and there will be a story inside of the work.
There's a lot of social commentary on it.
Yeah, what I've experienced in that place. And that comes as part of it, and you learn from that. So, but it's like the classic one. This just came out now recently. Norway can finally be 1 meter away from each other, stop being 1 meter away from each other and get back to normal to 2 meters away from each other, And that just tells you what you're dealing with. It's people really, I dealt with massive things. My worst thing was people mid-conversation going, I'm walking off.
What just happened?
To the guy, did he say goodbye? Did I miss it? And it was, no, he finished. He finished the conversation and he had no more to say, and he's walking away now. No, there's a lot to take from where the culture stemmed from. And then because my brother-in-law experienced this, he moved to Oslo. And when he would go back to the east, around the valley, Gudbrandsdal, to visit, his friends would be pissed at him. why did you leave? You know, what were you thinking? We're here. You know, there's an intrinsic part of being part of a community where they're already low in number, where it's felt, you know.
What scares me, Naeem, is that maybe sometimes I'm African to the core, you know, made in Nigeria all the way. I am proud of it. Would not choose anything else, you know. And my activism is always these kind of conversations, how we're trying to normalize the topic of racism, because apparently it's a taboo. People don't want to talk about it. And what scares me is that sometimes maybe I have actually become Norwegian. I'll tell you how.
Okay.
I'll tell you how. When I'm here and I'm having a conversation, I'm usually being looked upon as the one who talks a lot, or the one who carries the conversation, you know. But it's an African thing. We're boisterous people. We go for it. We talk passionately, right? And everyone's, yeah, you know, you find yourself being the one carrying the conversation every time in a space, because most Norwegians are introverted and they don't really say much, and it's like whatever. And that's kind of, for me, I hate that silence, to be honest. Funny thing is, when I go home, I become Norwegian.
There you go.
She's like, she knows what. you know what I mean, right? When I go home, back home to Africa, I swear to God, I sit down there with a bunch of guys. Everyone is laughing. Everyone is throwing down, going crazy. And I'm just watching.
Yeah.
And then they look at me like, yo, bro, what's wrong with you? And I'm like, no, I'm good. Like, no, seriously, I'm good. For some reason or the other, I can't engage in a conversation. This happens to me times that I feel, and people don't believe me when I tell them.
Yeah.
And I start thinking, holy shit. That's the Norwegian side coming out, mate.
Yeah, but can you also...
Don't deny it.
Yeah, can you revert back to okay, if one of my buddies rings on the phone, my missus hasn't got a clue what we're talking about. I go back to the old accent.
Yeah.
I draw in that thing, and I'm so relieved. But when I do go back, and I am sitting there, there's some social cueing that I've lost out on.
Right.
They moved on. You know, we're still old versions of where they are now. It's like people who've lived in Europe for a long time and like try to discuss Africa. They can't, because Africa moved on. We're living here. We're part of another generation and trying to get it.
Speaking of discussing Africa, Black Lives Matter. When that whole incident happened in the United States last year with George Floyd, and it sparked a whole entire new movement around the world. How did it make you feel, and what did you take out of it?
No, I think it was the first time people were actually sitting at home, had time to reflect on what they were seeing, and responded for the first time. I think people's lives are generally kept to a point that they can't worry about everything. But all of a sudden, you're viewing it live. You're seeing a part of culture that is not discussed or really being put outside of a media eye. You know, we haven't had, you can find, like the King episode to George Floyd, 1 million people died. There was no discussion of them. There was no real brought up themes where we could bring them about, but you'll find 1 million people in exactly the same situation that were never even discussed. But where it really hit home was that we were sitting, reflecting. We were not allowed to go anywhere. We had to be in a room with this elephant for the first time. Usually you can switch a channel, but it's on every channel.
Online, everywhere, it's there.
You can go out the door, but it's already in your neighborhood. People are angry, feeling it, trying to share their thoughts. And it was, in the beginning I thought it was amazing. I kind of like, my response was to it where I worried that it would become this new kind of, I kind of correspond more with the Black Lives Matter in England than I do with the US.
Can you just elaborate on that for a second?
It became too much of an organization that became some kind of NGO. Let's fund ourselves, let's do this, let's attack it that way, rather than actually sitting with the issues. And in the London version, it was more about the issues. Okay, let's approach this and begin to get it out into the open and kind of look at it pragmatically. So it just felt like it was drifting. So when I was going to make a comment about it, I chose to make a piece called Loving Day. So the piece is up in Sandviken. Loving Day, I think, is June 12th, 1976. I think that's it. And it was a couple, she's African, he's American, who fought for the right to be married. And they won. And this changed the law, the first interracial couple. And that's not long ago.
No, it's not.
We've got to think like these things are quite close. Christ, we just got gay marriage. Look how tragic we are, really. But that was like my reflection on it was that, okay, we've got two sides saying, we didn't mean just Black Lives Matter, we meant all lives matter, arguing themselves out of the original discussion. Be angry and speak your piece, but reality is that we have to live together at some point. So let's make allowances for that and kind of like go there. I kind of like made a few pieces around that time, some more political than others, but it's depending where you live, you need to be in a city to experience normality, if you're of any culture. I think that's how it works.
Are you implying that Bergen is not a city?
Bergen's as city as we can get here. I won't live anywhere else in Norway.
Fair enough.
I've experienced too much shit around this country to want to live anywhere else.
So the reasons I asked about the Black Lives Matter movement was, like I said early on, when we talk on the phone, you mentioned something about how your son was exposed to racism.
Yeah, absolutely. My son's white. He's so white, it's ridiculous. Even when he was like really young, I was worried because he had blue eyes and blonde hair. And I'm carrying him on my shoulder and people are just staring. And I'm looking at them going, Norwegian babies on sale this week. It's okay. Just adopted him. Walking off because people were just in shock. And then when he hit one, his hair darkened and his eyes browned. And I was like,
oh, thank God.
We're all good, missus. We're all good now. We can talk again. But but that's just about strong genetics. His family are a stunning group of people. I mean, wow. I couldn't have found a better group to be a part of. They're all their family name's Holmestad. All Holmestads are connected and related. They come from an area in Sogn.
Yeah.
They're like a solid bunch. They moved to the east, and they were still, even though they lived in the east, still called like Vestland. Oh. After 40 years of living there, those people from the Vestland. That didn't matter to them, but they just had this broad, open hearts, incredibly charming people. So I felt blessed being around them.
But then again, what did happen to your son?
And then my son was basically viewed as an outsider. Even though he was born there, he grew up there, it didn't matter. They made his life hell. They destroyed the best part of him. He was a charming, funny little fella. Lots of heart, laughed a lot. And they took that from him. to the point that it went far. It went more than it should. He moved back there. He came to Bergen to study. He studied art. Like me, he's an artist. He's found his path. He works in some other industries, but his heart still sits within the art. And he didn't find that until he moved to Bergen, that there were like-minded people and they were viewed like that, because he wasn't interested in football or cars. That's the bottom line.
Right.
You've got to have your basics in place. If you don't kick the
What
ball...
did that do to you, though, as a father, looking at this
refused
monster,
to-
ruining your child?
Though me and his mum were separated, I travelled there a couple of times a month over a 15-year period, and I refused to go out in that town. I do things with him. I could not find myself being kind to them. His family were there, beautiful people.
Why didn't you take him out of there, if I may ask? I'm
His
sorry.
mum was there, her job, her life, her family. He was part of a really big area, but a lot of it he kept from us.
Oh, of course.
Because that's what you do. You are a child, you're afraid, and you don't want to bring adults into it. And it's not till, I think he was around 18, 19 when he told us what had really gone on. We saw sides to him that were changing, but then that also came with being a teenager and part of his interests, which was computers. He was super brainiac, could build these monster machines and do that. That was his interest. But that part of it, he kept, what happened through school. He kept himself, and it's still difficult to even get the conversation out of him. He tears up. His anger sits really close to the surface. And obviously it's our fault, not seeing it.
It's hard to see.
It's part of
when kids
every
get bullied.
parent's nightmare that your child has been
The microphone.
put into that situation because you are not a part of their culture. I don't know what more to say on it. But I do know it's very difficult for me to find some level of forgiveness for what happened there. That rages in me. I would have used the hour
Here's an open question.
explaining how much that winds me up.
Here's an open question.
Yeah.
Here's an open question. You don't have to answer the question, because I can tell this is an emotional subject for you for sure. But do you mind telling us what happened?
No, I don't think he'd appreciate me saying it.
Then we
I
don't.
think
Then we don't talk about it.
that's his private business. The fact that he finally told me took years, but it's the worst case scenario for every parent.
Oh man,
that's the thing. You don't want to ever look at have your child look at you like that again, and tell you really didn't understand.
all right.
So, no, let's reflect on it. Let's look at where it's headed for our children coming up. Yours are 7 and...
Oh man, I'm scared. Like,
yeah,
I'll tell you this. My kid is an amazing child. She's beautiful. She's smart. Everything. I got 3 of them, and it's that scary thing, where you're good at communicating with the entire freaking world, but you just fail at communicating with your own children. It's a crazy. I'm serious, mate.
Yeah.
That shit scares the shit out of me, because it's like I could talk to her, everybody here, you, them, the people watching, but just wanting to communicate with your child about some crazy shit that might go off, because of who they are.
Have you explained to them what's coming?
I'm on it.
Yeah, okay.
I'm on it.
Yeah.
I'm on it, but it's baby steps. I don't want to drop it too much.
Yeah.
What I did say though was, I think schools in Norway. This is if anybody watching, if you work in a school, what I said was, if you find yourself as a teacher, and you're a Norwegian teacher, and you're at school, and there's a kid who's going through some racist bullshit or bullying or whatever as a result of who he looks like, his personality, whatever, his color of his skin, whatever. I think schools should bring in a system where they hire people from outside who are not Norwegian to explain what it is. Because I think they can really explain it. Having a Norwegian teacher explain the whole concept or nuance of racism to a kid, it's not that easy thing to do. Plus, it's like the kid is staring at his oppressor. You know what I mean? It's like your oppressor is telling you how to handle something that someone who looks like him or her has just done. So it's better if schools can just hire someone from outside who is not Norwegian and say, hey, guys, let's talk about this. Because then it's easier for the victim to understand it. Then it's easier for the other kids to look and say, oh, wow, this is a real thing. I don't know why schools don't do that. And
well,
it's,
there are some school programs
I hope so.
aligned to this now.
I hope so.
I work with Fridalen School where my kids go.
That is true.
We've got almost 50 languages in the area.
Oh, okay.
You know, there's no hiding it. You can't back off from it. So there's a good diversity of adults around that are looking out for it. But there are pockets where it happens, and it happens silently. And if you have a shy child, they can't share this with you. You know.
I mean, my daughter has big hair. Okay, big hair, and you know, she looks at the other kids and they have straight hair and it's all what it is, you know. And I keep, every night what I do is I look at my daughter and I say, you have the most beautiful hair in the world. You should be proud of it. I do this every night. It's like a ritual of mine now, you know. And why am I doing this? Why am I even in that position? You know, why can't she just be and just have her hair glowing everywhere without anybody giving a shit? But unfortunately, I live in a society where people look at you like you're different just because one aspect of you is different than everybody else. And it's a goddamn shame. Yeah. And that's why I wanted to talk about, you know, the situation over there, because...
Yeah, absolutely. There's the issue of self-identity and how we pass forward our experience to our kids now. I'm kind of like looking at it as I'm hands-on and very close by. So my missus makes sure she's somewhere within the teachers' union, on the board, hearing what's going on. I'm in the training clubs. I train at Newmark. I've got the Ulriken Eagles. You know, stay close by. Stay close by. Be a part of it. Let them show that there is something positive to be had from you being around, and their children's going to grow from it. So I've been doing a lot of teaching courses the last 5 years. I'll give you one great piece of news. There's an exceptional, interesting bunch growing up now.
They're different, yeah?
Oh,
they're different.
Not different. I mean, they are so smart.
Oh, that's what I meant.
They're so much smarter than us, and they have a world view because they plugged in. The net has given them access. So they have a really interesting view. And within my job, it's to draw out the kind of philosophical narratives, not just go draw a picture of a cat on the wall shaking a piece of string, but to ask their reality at present. What is it that's bothering you? Is there something you want to say? Or something that makes you happy? You know, would you like to share it? We begin to draw on themes they can actually share. And then I'm just amazed. I'm amazed at the quality of thinking, the broadness of it.
They have a more progressive way of...
Much more progressive. They are, you know, they're checking each other too, which is kind of cool.
Yeah, I see that. I see that.
If one steps out...
And they support one another.
There's support, yeah.
I've seen that.
There's something coming. But that lasts... Hopefully those friendships last. That's my hope. That it's... What I noticed is that when an individual is hurt, how to put this? if I chose to be racist against white people, I would have done it in South Africa.
Wow, that's a good one.
I would have done it under the worst oppression, the worst conditions. I have my own issues there with a particular culture of that time. And they have slowly inverted their own culture in South Africa. They're becoming less and less of themselves, which is tragic, really. They should have adapted and opened up, but there is pockets where they're becoming more and more isolated. And that would be tragic to see in other places. But that, if I carried that forward into England, I would never have got to know the crew that was around me, which were Irish, Polish, Czechoslovakian, Jamaican.
You're an artist. You're an artist.
No, this is the area I grew up in. They were just there, but they were the ones that were the most attractive to me. They kind of had something else they were offering up, and then a mass of English friends that I have that are, saw this. They saw us genuinely, and that really helped. That changed a lot for me. Very difficult at school to have a girlfriend. You were not allowed to be seen with a girl.
Yeah, that's pretty.
That was a funny one.
I think that's the opposite. That's one of like the flip sides of being in Norway. Those things is very the so-called liberal side of things. It's like it's weird. It's a double-edged sword somehow. But when we revert to what you said about Black Lives Matter movements in London, I kind of like that actually, because the truth is the Black Lives Matter movements, the huge one, the big rally, the one that happened in the States last year. To be honest, I looked at it with a pinch of salt, if not a pinch of salt, a spoonful of salt, actually. Because what for me, what people didn't understand was I looked at this and I said, oh my God, now we're definitely actually screwed.
Yeah.
Why? Because when history is being taught in schools here, they're being taught from the perspective of the African-American Negro slave. Do you know what I mean? Yeah. And then if you want to tell the story from the African perspective, it usually starts around somewhere in the 16 or 1700s, the Great Meeting at Berlin, and of course, imperialism and colonialism. That is the narrative, especially when it comes to history books here in Norway. But when the media starts forcing the Black Lives Matter movement on everybody, and black people are trying to, gain some kind of sovereignty and how to be included, which is a great thing, of course. What we forgot were the optics. What we forgot that we live in a country where who you are, who I am, anyone who looks like us, is determined by what is being seen on television, unfortunately. People look at me and they say things about, oh, wow, your poor people came from, and I'm like, no, I'm from Nigeria. I don't know what you're talking about. What are you saying? And it's like the oppression. Yes, I understand the Black Lives movement in America. Yes, but the truth is that had nothing to do with what's going on in Africa. That's a whole different story going on there, Yeah.
And I think being thrown into one bucket.
Yeah, you got thrown into one bucket.
The generalization has always been tragic because everybody belongs there, and that happens when you see the integration in the 70s that happened all around Europe.
Right.
They put warring cultures into the same area and told them, live here together in peace and harmony. And they wonder why the crime rate went up, why the violence went up, what was going on. People had not settled their differences. They were angry as hell. You have it in Malmö in Sweden. What a nightmare. They've allowed that to kind of expand and become a bigger issue. rather than actually look at true integration, which is about allowing people to live in diverse areas because they wouldn't do it. I didn't understand this concept as a kid. We used to ignore somebody, you said, we send them to Coventry.
Oh, okay.
That's because Coventry was a huge Asian African culture.
Right.
So it was a slur we didn't grasp till later when we grew up. It was just kind of like a turn of phrase, you could say. But it's interesting to look on it, and approach the generalization as like, well, they're black. But what do we know of each other's cultures?
Right.
We're
Exactly.
sitting here.
It's like day and night almost.
4,000 kilometers between us in space. We would never have crossed each other's cultures or learned each other's languages.
Ever met a Norwegian
What
sometime?
do you have? You have 600 million people in Africa?
Oh, man.
Something like that?
It's just around, Nigeria alone is 250 million.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, but how many languages?
In Nigeria, 300.
Yeah. So I think it's around 6,000 languages in Africa.
Oh, it should be around that for sure.
Yeah. The point being is that there is a continent, much like the US is another continent without them admitting it. 52 countries trying to get along. I don't want to be so harsh on them as I've been. I like the target. When Trump came into power and Bush was in power, and even Obama, I had my critics on him. As an artist, you're just like, this is fuel for the fire. Let's enjoy
Your
this.
job is amazing.
Yeah, it's fuel for the fire. This guy's just entertaining, but I only made one Trump piece. I refused to fall down that trap of giving him more attention again. But it just became too easy. But look at it as a similar thing we talk about with Norway. It's many separate pockets. You'll find good people in good communities taking care of business. You find ones that are afraid and can't handle any kind of intercultural mix and not know how to deal with it. And take that from it. So what I'm going to advise my kids is find your people. Find your people, create your community. When I look at my crew I have here, we are probably 8, 9 different countries hanging out together. It includes Norwegians. But that's what we are. We've found a common kind of relatable thing, and we know nothing of each other's cultures before we met. We've had to learn them and express, and we have a kind of fun evening of bringing together. It's your turn to bring along some culture to us this evening. We'd like to try something
That's
out.
dope.
Yeah,
That's
and
dope.
it's the coolest fucking thing ever because something you've never ever experienced before. You're looking at it going, what is that? Well, you're going to have to try it to figure it out, and that's just, it's a healthy way to live and figure it out. But this is, I've lived in Bergen 20 years. This is the biggest, smallest city I've ever been in. Because you can't stop finding new pockets. And that happens to me a lot.
I think that's what the world is. I'm so lucky I have the job I have or the career I have. It's like I meet so many
got the
different
timing
awesome
right.
people. Them and people show up. It's just great. And I always said, probably because I have this open mind, and we come from a world where we've been exposed to so many different cultures. Yeah. So finding new culture is actually a great thing. But before we let you go, I'm going to ask you, what's new? What's coming up? What can we expect from Naeem?
Well, I left you a black hole, didn't I? Look at your black hole.
Should I take that up? All right.
Look at it. So the thing about this, I joined a group of guys who are paint makers. They are creating kind of lo-fi cutting-edge materials.
Right.
So the original concept was Ventila Black, which is the most light-absorbent paint in the world. The paint then gets kind of stolen by one artist called Anish Kapoor, Indian artist, who then kind of somehow managed to patent that he's the only artist in the world allowed to use it.
Smart.
The reaction from the street art community is 1,000 artists all sit down and start sending information to this guy called Stuart Semple. He's a Dorset-based artist. And he starts creating this paint. And it's as close as we can get to this super expensive product, which costs you $2,000 for this. You'll get a bottle this size for 150 krona. You know, the point being, it was a collective work of 1,000 artists around the world who all said, everybody can buy this except Anish Kapoor.
Wow.
So it's a simple
Plot twist.
reverse statement.
Plot twist.
yeah, it's a simple reverse statement. And what I found with the paint is, it is incredibly interesting, but it is also very daunting. I've created a couple of paintings in it. Thank you. I've created a couple of paintings in it, and I literally felt very uncomfortable in the room with it.
Oh, okay.
So I think something about a distortion of what's going on, the whole street art environment, sort of like new art is closing down. You're seeing a repetition of the same kind of 3 stencils in the city that no one's really taking seriously. And it's it kind of we need a moment where we just take a break. You know, I advise the people who are encouraging it to take a break too and start to really look at disturbing the scene again. Create something that's a little bit disturbing, a little bit outside of themselves, outside of their comfort zone, and ask another question. Just move forward. So I have a project together with, he's actually a music producer from LA called Winter Lazarus. He's now moved and based in Bergen. Okay. He's done some text, some lyrics that I'm basing this project around, and we're going to be putting up in Merlinpris in the next month.
Oh, I'm looking forward to seeing that.
So it'll be exciting.
I mean, it's been a pleasure having you
too, man.
out here.
Absolute joy.
And one thing I want to explain, I think people don't catch, is that the whole idea of meeting of the minds is to bring out the human aspects of people. You know, Nimi is a legend. You know, you've been around, you've done your thing. We've seen your artwork everywhere. And you do seminars and you do workshops, and people, we know who you are as an artist. But what we forget sometimes is knowing the person as the person and what the person's experienced, what they've been through. Some of the things you've said today, I'm pretty sure a lot of us don't know.
Not things we talk about.
You know, and that's where it gives me so much joy to be able to bring out this side of people when I speak to them, because then they really resonate and think about, oh, wow, shit, I did not think about that. And hopefully someone watching at home can connect to the human side of you.
So.
Thank you very much for coming out, sir. Really appreciate it. Thank you guys for showing up.
Guys. Thank you.
Even though we thought...
So kind of you.
Thank you very much for watching Meeting of the Minds. I still go by the name of Dorian's Grave. We will not be returning next week. We're taking a little break. Need it. And we'll be back on the 1st of November, I believe, with something. And no, actually, we'll be back on the 29th of October with Floetic Friday. So thank you very much for coming, for watching, and have a good night. Cheers.